that anybody who's committed to democracy in this country now is a radical, because democracy is a radical idea here.
Certainly, it was personal for me. These ideas were not just speeches in the forum. The pain of it all became most acute in terms of my relationship with my dad. He couldn't understand why I was so upset that with a wife and 3 kids and a pretty little house on Sunnyside Street, I would throw that all over, quit my good job, which to him was a great job. That was a step up. He had worked in a factory all his life, and here his son was white collar with a college education. That to him was terrific. Why complain about that? Why throw that over to run off with these strange political gypsies who are into something they call the movement? It led to an enormous rupture in our relationship.
Only the promise of a material affluence, only the promise of 2 cars, only the promise of a split level divided again and again and again in suburbia after suburbia after suburbia. That's the only thing that this culture can offer people now, bread alone. Now, the question is whether or not you're going to accept that.
I shared a blazing contempt for everything that America seemed to pride itself in, that is to say, straight, middle America. Since then, I think I've learned to appreciate better the terrific labor, the industry, and good luck that are required for the purger of that dream. It looks shakier these days, and the culture that could achieve some confidence in its ability to provide the nice house on the nice street, the nice school, the nice college education, the nice job. The confidence of such a culture seems more of an achievement than it did. It seemed to come without effort, but now I understand there was a lot of effort and a lot of chanciness to it.
For a tiny fringe of the millions of young people who were radicalized in the 1960s, the 1970s became a time to declare war on America. Frustrated by Vietnam and enraged by police repression, these self-professed revolutionaries vowed to fight back against those they called the fascist establishment.
There was an explosion probably in the cellar, and it blew out the cellar walls, the basement walls, the front wall, collapsed 3 of the floors, and started fire that consumed almost the entire building.
In 1970, 3 members of the Weathermen blew themselves up when a Greenwich Village townhouse they had converted to a bomb factory accidentally exploded.
One of the Weatherman kids who was killed in the townhouse explosion in 1970, Terry Robbins, was a great fan of the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. You remember a movie about a couple of outlaws who for a long time can get away with anything. They have so many cute tricks. Suddenly, there's a guy chasing them who they can't outfox. And the one Butch keeps saying to the other Sundance, looking back, who are those guys? Mingling of fear and admiration. The Weathermen felt the same thing. Who are those guys? They knew they had attracted the big shots. The big boys were coming after them. The ones that the Weathermen would never be able to outfox or outwit or outlast or outorganize. They knew they were done for. They had a real quality of fatalism and death about them. But they thought they had to, nevertheless, they had to go ahead and do what they were doing, which came to building bombs. Because legitimate politics had been destroyed by America, spelled with a K.
For many political activists who were frustrated, exhausted, and broke, the blossoming counterculture seemed to signal that their causes had hit a dead end. Attracted by this appealing alternative, some activists left the city behind to explore a quieter, non-political life in the country.
I went through a personal burnout period in 1970, 71. I left the movement to its own devices. I became very self-consciously a non-leader. I left the big city and went to live in the countryside. There were maybe a half dozen, sometimes a dozen other people living at this very spacious place, all of whom were more or less in the situation of burnout that I was in, wondering what to do, wondering if there was anything to do more politically, scared of the weathermen, scared of the FBI even more, beginning to be quite desperate, I suppose, in a political sense, and many of us wondering whatever was going to happen to this country, but no longer feeling that anything that we did made much difference.
When will those questions be answered? With the memories and passions from the 60s still stirring in so many, perhaps history won't be able to decide on the full impact of the 60s until the last member of the 60s generation has passed on. That's the sentiment of the second answer to the question about the real meaning of the 60s experience. An appreciation that, on a personal level at least, final assessments don't come easy. Carl Oglesby.
And meantime, we had an experience which I suppose is unique in American history, and which nobody who went through it will ever forget. It's an experience filled with treasured moments and nightmares alike to this day, all interwoven. And I think that it will always be this way. The 60s will never level out. It's a corkscrew, it's a tailspin, it's a joyride on a roller coaster. It's a never-ending mystery. Who won, who lost, what were the terms of victory and defeat? We'll always be discussing that. I think it was it was another civil war in a sense. And it has all the drama, the melodrama, the comedy, the pathos, above all the confusion, the uncertainty as to outcome and meaning and significance that the Civil War of the 1860s had. Maybe it's just that in every 60s decade, 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, we have to go through some crisis like this. But there was certainly that we had us a time, and we're still trying to figure out what it was all about.